devotee and she is not there. Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Mother. How are you?
Good, good.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. How are you?
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Oh, Hare Krishna. How are you?
I'm good.
That's good. Mataji, Shalu Mataji, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna
Hare
Prabhuji.
Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam, all glory to Srila Prabhupada.
Yeah, Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Oh, Hare Krishna, Navneet. How are you?
Good.
Oh, nice.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, how are you?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mother. How are you?
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Oh, Hari Bol, how are you?
Hare Krishna Subhashji.
Fine.
Oh, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
क्या हाल है? ठीक है.
Did you call me earlier?
इनका बड़ा बैच बना लो.
क्या हाल है ਤੁਹਾਡਾ?
तो अगली बार से मुझे ये पूरे बना के रेडी करके वो मैं ले आया करूँगी. ठीक है? दूसरे आगे ही और.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Mother. How are you?
मेरे पे पता फिर वहाँ और है. सिर्फ आपने करे एक सेट था ना.
Okay. I think we can get started. So I'm going to share the screen and put the Pranami mantra.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thank you. Okay, let's see. Share screen.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Please accept my presence. Yes, Srila Prabhu.
Odi Dhanvat Pranam, Jai Srila Prabhupada. How are you?
I'm fine, Prabhu. How are you?
Very good, thanks. Okay, so I hope you can see the screen. Who would like to lead today?
Can I lead Prabhuji?
Postpone.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, go ahead. बस ठीक है.
नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी इति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवै गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषशून्यवादी पाश्चात्याचार्यकारिणे. जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत श्रीवासादि जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि भक्तवृंद. हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. वाचा कल्पतरुचा कृपा सिंधु पतितनां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो. हरे कृष्ण.
Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
जय.
Hare Krishna. Okay. So before we start, I had a question for you. Next Thursday is, what is it next Thursday? Anybody know?
Nityanand Triyodashi.
Yes, thank you. Lord Nityanand Triyodashi, Appearance Day. And a question I had for you was, would you prefer to do the regular Bhagavatam class? We will start 5th Canto. Or would you prefer to glorify Lord Nityanand on the Thursday coming week?
Glorified Lord
Yeah, Lord Nityananda, glorifying not Lord Nityananda.
Okay. Anybody else?
Gee, I thought Nityananda was the 24th, Wednesday.
No, it's Thursday. At least Toronto is Thursday.
You're probably right then.
Unless, I mean, sometimes it's different in different cities.
Yeah, I'm looking at another calendar which may be different. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Pavilion Temple, Prabhu is at Wednesday.
Sorry, which temple?
In Burnby Temple is Wednesday.
Oh, in Vancouver. That's Mary Bhatt you're saying as well.
And Prabhuji, if I can request that today, if we can glorify Lord Advaita Acharya Ji.
Yeah.
What we'll do is at the end of the class, for those of you who want to stay, we can discuss Lord Advaita as well. Okay, is that okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Prabhu.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you then. So, is there a consensus that next Thursday we should do Lord Nityananda Triyodashi?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you. Let's do that. I'm also giving a class on Sunday at our temple, Zoom and Facebook, on Lord Nityananda as well. So those of you who may be interested may want to join Facebook.
Isn't it 5 o'clock?
Yeah, on not this Sunday, Sunday after, but it is, I think 27th or 28th, something like that. So from 5 p.m. to 5 to 6.
5.
And then his Facebook is Toronto Krishna, I think. So, okay, all right. Okay, so then are there any questions from last week? Anybody remembers what we talked about last week? What was the main topic, like the theme?
King Prachinbarhi.
Yes, thank you, Navneet. Okay, all right, so we continue from there. Before I start, is the sound volume okay?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Okay. So as I said, we were discussing King Prachinbarhi last week. So today we'll talk about his dynasty. And Srimad Bhagavatam says, by the way, for those of you who want to know, chapter 24, we covered chapter 24 to 31, which is the end of the Canto also. So Maharaj Prachinbarhi's grandson was a very famous king by the name of King Bharishat, also known as King Prachinbarhi. So Bharishat or Prachinbarhi, same person. Now he was very expert in performing various kinds of fruitive activities. So fruitive sacrifices, I should say. He and his wife, whose name was Shatadruti, they had 10 sons. And being the sons of Prachinbarhi, they were known as Prachetas. So when they grew up, the king Prachinbarhi ordered them to get married and have children. So upon getting that instruction from their father, with his permission, they decided to enter the ocean to perform austerities and penances for 10,000 years actually. So, and then they got his permission and they left to go to this ocean. On the way, they passed through an area where there was a great, beautiful reservoir of water, almost as big as an ocean. And there was some very pleasant music being played. There was, reservoir full of beautiful flowers, lotus, and all that kind of things. So they stopped for a few minutes to listen to the music and to appreciate and admire what they were looking at. And suddenly they saw Lord Shiva emerge from the water. And he was accompanied by his many associates and musicians who were glorifying him. And I guess that's the music they had heard. So Prachetas, they of course they recognized Lord Shiva, they offered their obeisances. And Lord Shiva said, you know, I know who you are. And I know what your plan is. Therefore, I have appeared in front of you to show you my mercy. You're very dear to me because you have fully surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he said, okay, I'm going to give you a mantra which consists of many verses of prayers. Excuse me. Hear them carefully. And he said that this mantra is the best prayer for anyone aspiring to attain the ultimate goal of life. After that, Lord Shiva chanted this mantra. It's the form of a prayer to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in the fourth canto, there are chapters 24, verses 33 to 68. 33 to 68. And this prayer mostly expresses Lord Shiva's intense desire to see the Lord by the performance of pure devotional service in the company of pure devotees. And finally, it begs the Lord to give him the association of pure devotees. As I said, this is about 36 verses in this mantra or prayers, but one of them is my favorite. And it is so good that it actually is repeated in the, excuse me, in chapter 30 of the same canto by the Prachetas themselves. And the verse goes something like this. Excuse me. Chanadhen api tulaye naswargam na punarbhavam bhagavad sangi sangasya martyanam kimutashitaha, which basically means that a devotee considers even a fraction of a moment's association with a pure devotee. So even a fraction of a moment's association with a pure devotee is better. It's better than attaining heavenly planets or even moksha. And this verse goes on to say that, therefore, what interest can a devotee then have in the benedictions of demigods who are themselves subject to birth and death? Beautiful verse, very beautiful verse. And Lord Shiva told them that this prayer was first spoken by his father, Lord Brahma, who is the master creator, master secondary creator. Master creator, of course, is Krishna, but Brahma is the secondary creator. Later, Lord Brahma instructed other creators, who are also known as Prajapatis, headed by Bhrigu Rishi, in this prayer, because they had been given the task to create, to increase the progeny. And that's why they were known as Prajapatis. So after telling them the mantra, Lord Shiva instructed the Prachetas to execute their occupational duties and just chant this prayer, fixing their mind on the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of God. And he said, this way you will very easily be able to invoke the mercy of the Lord. He said that a devotee who rises early in the morning and with folded hands chants these prayers and gives facilities to others to hear these prayers certainly becomes free from all bondage. Now, I'm hoping that some of you at least are feeling excited to go home tonight, or you are at home. After the class, you probably want to read these prayers, and I would encourage you to do that. Chapter 24, fourth canto, from 33 to 68. Anyway, so the Prachetas then worship the Lord, worship the Lord Shiva with great devotion and respect, and then Lord Shiva disappeared. So before I move to the next chapter and what happened after that, I'm going to stop and see if there's any questions or comments or realizations that you wish to share. Anything? Okay, all right. Then we move on to chapter 25, which is a very, very interesting chapter. So first of all, let's start by saying that the Prachetas stood in water for 10,000 years and recited this prayer given to them by Lord Shiva. While they were undergoing these severe austerities in the water, their father, whose name was Prachinbarhi or Mahishat, he was performing different types of fruitive activities, mainly fruitive sacrifices, which means sacrifice with the expectation of getting some material result. And he was at it all the time. It was really good and great at it. So at that time, great Saint Narada Muni, he became very compassionate upon the King Prachinbarhi. And so I'm going to ask you a question. Why would Narada Muni feel compassionate towards a king who's performing so many fruitive sacrifices, which means sacrifices for the sake of material benefits? Any ideas? I'm just trying to make sure everyone's awake.
Is it because Narad Muni was feeling compassionate that he was wasting his time, so give him some right instructions so that he could, dovetail his activities towards the service of the Lord?
Yes, basically, that's correct. I was a little distracted by a comment that some people feel the volume is low. Is it low? Because then I need to figure out what to do.
It's good for me, Prabhuji.
Okay, what about
I thought it's my headphones.
Sorry?
No, Prabhu, I also felt it's low. I thought it's my headphone problem.
Okay, so let me change my microphone. Just 1 second. Is this better? Is this better or same or worse?
Yes, Prabhuji. Yes, better, Prabhuji, better.
It's good.
Okay.
Very good.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad I asked. And thank you, Sonam, for pointing it out. Okay. So, Prabhuji, yes, you gave the right answer. So, Narada Muni felt compassion because he felt that he's wasting his time, his life, basically. And he decided to come down, I should say, and instruct King Prachinbarhi on spiritual life. And he point blank asked the king, why are you performing all these fruitive sacrifices when the chief aim or purpose of life is to get rid of the miseries and enjoy eternal happiness? He said, neither getting rid of the miseries nor enjoying happiness, eternal happiness, is going to be realized by fruitive activities. So what's happening? The king, now give him credit, very humbly, he said, I don't know the ultimate goal of life. And therefore, I've only been interested in family and wealth. And then he requested Narada Muni to please instruct him in pure knowledge that will get him out of the entanglement of the fruitive activities. So give him credit, give the king credit for accepting he doesn't know and requesting instruction from Narada Muni. Narada Muni then pointed towards the sky and said, look up and see all those animals. They're hanging around in the sky. These are the ones you mercilessly sacrificed in your sacrifices. And you know what they're doing? They're simply awaiting your death. So they can avenge injuries you have inflicted upon them. And after you die, they will pierce your body with iron horns. Really scared him. Then Narada Muni said, okay, you know what? I'm going to tell you the story of a king, Puranjana. I should say Puranjan. That is the correct pronunciation. I should also point out that the story that Narada Muni is going to tell about King Puranjan, not a true story. It's an allegory. Do you know what an allegory means before I move on? Everyone know what allegory is? So allegory is like a parable, a fable, a story that's used to symbolize something. So it's just to send a message out, but it's not historical, it's not history. And Narada tells him right away, it's allegorical story. So you have to understand what it means and not that it's repeating some kind of history. Anyway, so I told him that and he said, I'm simply trying to convey a message to you. I said, okay, so the King Puranjan had a friend whose name was Avigyat. Avigyat is a Sanskrit word which means we don't know, or I should say a person or thing about which we don't know much. If it's a person, then their activities are mystery to everyone. We just don't know him. That's called Avigyat. Gyat means somebody, something that's known. Avigyat means something that's not known. Anyway, King Puranjan was searching. So this king that he's talking about now. Don't get confused with King Puranjan and King Bharishmata or Prachinbarhi. Prachinbarhi is the audience of Narada Muni. King Puranjan is the character in the story that Narada Muni is telling. So anyway, Narada Muni goes on. Just King Puranjan was searching for a suitable place to live, and for that purpose he traveled all around the world. But he couldn't find a place where all his material desires could be fulfilled. So he kept trying. Finally, he found a city in India that had 9 gates and consisted of beautiful houses, lakes, and parks. While wandering in one of those parks, the king saw a very beautiful and young woman who had 10 servants, and each servant had hundreds of wives accompanying them. This young woman was protected on all sides by a 5-hooded snake. So please pay attention to all the personalities that I'm pointing out who are accompanying this girl. So the 5-hooded snake, the 10 servants, and the hundreds of wives accompanying each servant. Okay.
Prabhuji, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
Is it possible for you to mute everyone, because there's some Bollywood music and I am not that good with paying attention when the...
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, all right. Yeah, I'm sorry I don't go to chat very often. I get focused on what I'm saying. So if you sent me a message, I probably didn't see it. Okay, all right. So the 10 servants, each servant with hundreds of thousands of wives, and the 500 snake. Now this King Puranjan was extremely attracted to this woman. So he asked her who she was, where was she coming from, and who her father was. He asked her about those 11 strong bodyguards and the 10 servants and the women following those servants, and the snake. She wanted to know everything about her. And then he asked her if she was Mother Parvati or Mother Lakshmi. Actually, he didn't use the word mother, I'm using it. He said if she was Parvati or Lakshmi. And then he wanted to know if she was looking for a husband. He talked about direct approach, man. He was something else. Anyway, so then he told her that he was a great hero and a very powerful king on this planet. And then he pleaded with her to not be so shy and smile and look at him. Well, I guess the flattery worked. And she accepted his request to smile at him. And then she herself felt attracted to him. And then she started to answer his questions. Now, please pay attention to the answers, but they're very interesting answers. She said, I don't know who my father is, nor do I know the names or the origin of my associates. All these men and women you see with me are my friends. And the snake, who always remains awake, protects this city even when she is sleeping. And then she said, that's all I know. Well, very cryptic answer, just as cryptic as the personalities who were with her. So Srila Prabhupada explains in his purport that a living entity is ignorant of its origin. It doesn't know where it's coming from, why this material world was created, why is he here, why are there other people working in this material world, and what is the ultimate source of manifestation of this material world. In other words, we are all ignorant of some very basic things. This woman cannot tell her father's name because she doesn't know where she has come from. Nor does she know why is she there in this, why is she here in the first place. She doesn't know that this is the situation with all living entities in the material world. In the material world, there are so many facilities for living, but generally speaking, we are so foolish that we don't even ask who made this world habitable? Who created this? Who created it well enough that we can actually live here? And Srila Prabhupada further explains her answers, or non-answers, I should say. So, the 10 servants that's referring to are the 10 senses, the 5 knowledge gathering senses and 5 working senses. And the 11th person is the mind, who is very strong. The hundreds of women following each servant, which is the senses, are our material desires. The snake actually is the life force or life air. And it's protecting the city or the body, because the mind and the senses work only as long as life air is there. Once the life air leaves, the mind and the senses stop working. And the Puranjan, the hero of this allegory, is of course the living entity. So is she. Okay? So hope with that information, some of the questions and answers are starting to make sense, because now you can understand where the story is going. So basically, she's saying that the life force, the snake, always remains awake even when we go to sleep. And it's because of that the snake is awake that we are able to dream. And even when the soul transmigrates to another body, the life force still remains with the soul and is carried to the next body. That's the transmigration going on. And even during the sleeping hours, by the virtue of our breathing process, I'm not saying this right. Let me rephrase that. When we're sleeping, we can understand that the snake is awake because we're breathing. And the snake is known to eat the air, and in eating the air which is passing within the body, and that's why we're breathing. I hope that's clear. The air is exhibited in the form of breathing, as I was saying. And as long as the breathing is there, we can understand that the sleeping man is alive. If there's no breathing, we know this person is dead, not just sleeping. And even when we are sleeping, this life force remains active and alive to protect this body. Okay, so it might have been too complicated, so I'm going to pause and see if I've made any sense to anybody. If not, just ask a question or ask me to repeat what I said, because I don't want to leave you confused.
So, Prabhu, did you compare ourselves with snake?
No, we compared ourselves, our life air, with the snake. And life air, does everyone understand what life air is? In Hindi, the word is pran.
Mm-hmm.
So this is always accompanying the soul. Soul is actually floating. The 5 types of air, pran, apan, udan, saman, and vyan. The 5 types of air. The soul is floating in that air. So when the pran leaves, the soul goes with it. So this pran is also the one that allows the breathing process to happen by the expression being used by eating the air, which means the air is coming in, it's circulating in the body, and it's going back. So inhaling and exhaling process. That's facilitated by life air, which is being represented by snake here. And it's called 5-footed because of the 5 different types of air that are there. So would that kind of answer your question, or still confusing?
I'm just trying to understand what the snake analogy is. I joined a few minutes late, so I'm just trying to follow.
So it said that snake is accompanying the girl, the woman. The woman says, it's there to protect me. So the idea is that a snake representing the life air is the protection mechanism within the body, because this is where the soul floats. And once the life air leaves, soul leaves with it, and we are basically no longer alive. That's basically it.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Anybody else? Because this otherwise very confusing. Like it took me a few times of reading properly to make sure I understood this. So and there's more to tell, but just that part, if not clear, ask me a question, or I can move on to the next point and then wait until the end of the chapter, then you can ask the questions.
So Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
So
just let me know if I'm wrong. Like what I understood, like snake is a life air, and the soul floats in this life air.
Correct.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Krishna, quick question. Sorry, because I also joined a little late. What chapter are we on right now?
25, 4th Canto, chapter 25. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure, no worries. Okay, all right. Excuse me. So, getting back to the girl, she said that she's addressing the king, Puranjan. She said that you have great desire to satisfy your senses, and I and all my friends will try our best to fulfill your desires. And then she said, the city of 9 gates has been arranged so you can have all kinds of sense gratification for your lifespan of 100 years. And everything for sense gratification is supplied in this city. Okay, so now let me stop again. What is the city of 9 gates that she's referring to? No, but what's the city?
Human.
Yes.
Human body.
Body.
Human
Yes.
body.
Yes, human body. And the 9 gates, my wife was just answering it. The 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, 1 mouth, that's 7. And it's called, they are outside. And then the anus and the genitals are the ones that are down, they're called inside. So those are 9 gates she's talking about. Okay. She's saying this body, she said, usually the word city of 9 gates, is there for your enjoyment, for your sense gratification. Everything is available. And then she said, responding to the flattery of the king, which girl will not accept you as a husband? You're so famous. You're so magnanimous. You're so beautiful. And then she said, and you're easily gotten. And she said, I think you're traveling on this earth just for my benefit. So here I am. So Narada Muni, who was he talking to?
King.
Prachinbarhi, yes, Prachinbarhi, he was talking to Prachinbarhi. So Narada Muni said to him, to the king, then these two entered that city of 9 gates and enjoyed life for 100 years. And he explained, in great detail what these 9 gates are that we just talked about and what their function was. So we all know the function of all the 9 gates that we just mentioned. So he explained all that to King Prachinbarhi. And he went back to the story. I said, this King Puranjan, he was so taken by his wife, or the beauty and the charms of his wife. There's a very wonderful description of how much he was taken by his wife. It says, when the queen, this girl who now married him became the queen, when the queen drank liquor, he also engaged in drinking. When the queen dined, he dined with her. When she chewed, he chewed along with her. When she sang, he also sang. When she cried, he also cried. And when the queen laughed, he also laughed. When she talked loosely, he also talked loosely. And when she walked, the king walked behind her. If she stood still, he would also stand still. When she sat down, he would also sit down. When she lied down on the bed, he would also follow and lie down in the bed with her. And when the queen heard something, he would follow her to hear the same thing. When the queen saw something, he would also look at it. And when the queen smelled something, the king would follow the queen to smell whatever she was smelling. When she touched something, he would also touch it. And when she was lamenting the poor king, he also followed her in her lamentation. In the same way, when the queen felt enjoyment, he also enjoyed. And when she was satisfied, he also felt satisfaction. Well, there are lots of Matajis here on this call. How would you like to have a husband like that?
No one.
You read my mind, Prabhuji.
What's that?
No one will like that.
You read my mind, actually.
Yeah, I read
was going,
I mean, kind of sounds clingy to me, no? Anyway,
Sorry?
I said sounds clingy. He's always clinging to her and doing whatever she does.
Oh, okay.
Yes, no? Anyway, this kind of could be a dangerous topic, so I won't dwell on this. But it just occurred to me that very strange. Anyway, but she loved it, and obviously he was loving it. So he remained under her full control of his wife just like a pet animal dancing according to the desires of his master. But he kept her happy and she kept him happy, so that's what counts. So Srila Prabhupada actually explains that in material consciousness, the living entity which is situated in the heart follows the intelligence. The intelligence in this story is depicted as the queen, and the soul follows the material intelligence, just as the king was following his wife. And Srila Prabhupada concludes that material intelligence is the cause of bondage for the living entity. And therefore, one has to take to spiritual intelligence to come out of the material entanglement. So this is how Prabhupada is reacting to the behavior of King Puranjan. Well, we go to next chapter 26. One day, King Puranjan decided he wanted to go hunting in a forest. So he went and spent the whole day hunting, basically killing so many innocent animals. In the evening, he returned to his palace and he got refreshed, took his bath and all that, his puja and everything. And after that, he started looking for his wife. And she was nowhere to be seen. So he went, huge palace, he went from one corner to the other corner, asking everybody if they had seen her. Finally, a maid servant pointed him to the room where she was. He went into the room and saw her lying on the floor with no bedding. So King was an expert in flattery, as I mentioned before, and he started again. He began to pacify the queen. And he asked her to please give her anger up and to please smile upon him. And he told her how beautiful she was, how beautiful her hair was, beautiful raised nose, and he requested her to please talk to him. He asked her if somebody had offended her. I said, probably you're offended by my disappearance for the whole day. And he said, if somebody has offended you, please tell me. Unless that person is a devotee, I'll punish him. And he said, I'm very, very sorry. I was out all day hunting. I won't do this again. So please forgive me and be pleased with me. And of course, he was feeling very lusty at this time. And he requested her to please enjoy with him. Well, that takes us to the next chapter. Narada Muni continued his story and said, after bewildering her husband in so many different ways and bringing him under full control, the queen satisfied the king's desires. Basically, what's happening here is that the king has lost his good sense because he's so captivated by his beautiful wife that's doing things a normal person may not do. And he forgot. He simply forgot that the passing of days and nights meant that the span of his life was being reduced, but without any profit. Whatever he was doing was not going to result in any kind of lasting profit. He considered his wife to be his life and soul, and thus he was overwhelmed by the mode of ignorance. I mean, basically, he had no idea what self-realization means. He didn't understand that term at all. And this way, his life and his youth expired in what felt like half a moment. In the process, he had 1,100 sons and 1,100 daughters. And then each of these sons and daughters produced hundreds and hundreds of sons and grandsons. You can imagine how the whole city was populated by just the family of King Puranjan. And the sons and the grandsons were virtually plunderers of king's riches, including his home and treasury, which is normal, by the way, because, I mean, it costs a lot of money to raise the sons and grandsons. So in that sense, they are described as plunderers. Of course, the king never lost the desire to satisfy his material desires. So he kept on worshipping demigods, his forefathers, and social leaders with various types of fruitive sacrifices. So he continued with that. I'm talking about King Puranjan here, so don't get confused. And then Narada Muni, it's like he went to Act 2 of the drama. He changed the scene completely. He said, let me tell you about this king of Gandharva Loka. Gandharvas are a type of demigods who are very great at singing and dancing. So he said, once there was a Gandharva king by the name of Chandavega. Chandavega, which basically means something or someone that's very swiftly passing away. This Chandavega represents time. Because remember, it's all allegory. So this king, Gandharva king Chandavega, whose name is swiftly passing away, he represents time. And as we know, time passes very fast. He had 360 powerful soldiers, which represent the days of the year. And there were 360 female Gandharvis accompanying Chandavega. Of course, they represent the nights. So 360 days, 360 nights in 1 year of Chandavega. And so they all showed up at the city of Puranjan and started to repeatedly plunder it. That snake, the 500 snake, he came to the defense of the city. Again, if you remember from the discussion, the snake is representing the life air. As 500, as you said, there are 5 types of air: Pran, Apan, Vyan, Udan, and Saman. So that snake is defending the city. So he's fighting these Gandharvas for 100 years. But he was fighting alone with 720, 360 great warriors. So after 100 years, he became very weak. And when the king and the king's friends, who were the friends? The senses and the mind. So the king and his friends saw that the snake was becoming weak. They became very anxious. So once again, we can understand that once a person reaches the age of 100 years, old and weak, then the anxiety increases, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But even at that age, being completely under the control of women, King Puranjan could not understand that he was reaching the point of death. And then something else happens. There's a daughter of formidable time who was seeking a husband, came to the same city. Can you please mute yourself, everyone? Okay. So the daughter of time came to the same city. Now just let me explain a few other things. Because she was the daughter of time, the Sanskrit word for time is Kal, and the Sanskrit word for daughter is Kanya. So her nickname was Kal Kanya, the daughter of time. But her real name was Jara, which is Sanskrit word meaning old age. We often hear about the 4 problems: Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi, which is birth, death, old age, and disease. Jara is the old age. So her name was old age. So she was looking for a husband, obviously, but nobody wanted her. Who wants old age? Who wants to get old? Nobody. Even the old doesn't want to be old. And they wear the toupee and anti-aging creams and Fair and Lovely and all those kind of things. They do those things so they won't look old. So nobody wanted her as wife. And she's also known as Durbhaga, which basically means Dur means ill or bad, Bhaga means bhagya or fate. So Durbhaga means ill-fated. So her name is old and ill-fated is the second name. Who would want a woman like that as his wife? So nobody would accept her. So Narada Muni then gave a brief history of her background. He said that once when he was visiting the earth, Jara, this Kal Kanya, the daughter of time, made an indecent proposal to him. I mean, imagine making that kind of proposal to Narada Muni, a saint, a brahmachari. I mean, every time you see, you want to offer obeisances, but here she is making an indecent proposal. So, of course, he refused, and she became very angry, and she cursed him. She cursed him, said, "You will never be able to stay in one place for a long time." Well, Narada Muni took it as a blessing, of course. But then he said, why don't you approach the king of Yavanas, whose name is Bhaya in Sanskrit, or fear in English. Now, why king of Yavanas? Anybody knows what the word Yavana means? It does not mean Muslim, by the way. What is the word?
Youth.
No,
young.
not Yavan. Yavan.
Yavan.
Yavan. No matra anywhere. Yavan. Yavan is a person who's not familiar with Vedic injunctions, nor does he believe in them, nor does he follow them. So basically, uncivilized in the sense of not having studied the Vedas or scriptures. So the king of those is named Bhaya or fear. And he said, go and propose to him to marry you. So she went there and proposed to him. Like she was a very shameless person. And the king of Yavanas, Bhaya or fear, said, you are inauspicious and no one likes you. So how can anyone accept you as his wife? He said, you know what, but you have come to me, so I will accept you as my sister. And I will employ you and my brother, whose name is Prajwar, to act imperceptibly in the world. That's why the influence of time and even things like fever, they sneak up to you. Suddenly you realize that either time has passed or you have fever. Prajwar actually means fever sent by Lord Vishnu, which is kind of interesting meaning that Prabhupada gives to this word. Anyway, so Prabhupada also explains that because king of Yavanas was uncultured, uncouth, his mind was that I'll make her my sister, but I can still enjoy with her. So he said, you be my sister. Anyway, she agreed. Moving on to the next chapter. Narada Muni said, now this king of Yavans, Bhaya or fear, his brother Prajwar or fever, Kalkanya, whose name was Jara, and their soldiers, the 720 soldiers, they all began to travel all over the world. And they finally landed in the city of Puranjan, and they attacked all the inhabitants of the city. And gradually they rendered every one of them useless for all purposes. While Kalkanya was attacking the body, the other soldiers of the Yavan king entered the city through various gates, the 9 gates, and began to give severe trouble to all the citizens. So again, now getting old and getting sick. When Kalkanya embraced the king Puranjan, he lost all his beauty, he became poor in intelligence, and he lost all his opulence. And then the King Puranjan started noticing some very interesting things. He noticed that his family members and even the servants were gradually opposing him. And his wife was becoming cold and indifferent. So remember who the servants are? Who remembers who the servants are representing?
Snake.
The senses.
Senses, yes, thank you. Senses, they represent the senses. So senses are not cooperating anymore. They're not listening to him. So can't hear properly, can't see very well, can barely walk, got all sorts of other medical issues. That's what she's referring to. So this made King Puranjan very anxious. But he couldn't do anything about it because he was completely and thoroughly overwhelmed by Kalkanya, by time, the daughter of time. Yet, despite all this, can't see well, can barely speak, cannot digest much, can't hear, hands are shaking all the time, can barely walk, but he remained very affectionate towards his wife and children, and one continued to worry about maintaining them. Oh, what will happen after me? Who will take care of them? In the meantime, Prajwar, the brother of the king, set fire to the city. What does fire to the city means? The temperature of the body started going up. 102, 103, 104. And of course, the snake was acting like the superintendent of police for the city. He wanted to leave. He just wanted to leave the city because the fire was too strong and was producing too much heat. He couldn't take that anymore. But his attempts to leave the body were checked by his enemies. And so he was baffled in his attempts to escape. So he started to cry very loudly. And Puranjana still was worrying about who's going to take care of my wife, who's going to take care of my children, how will they survive without me? And then he started to remember how nicely, how faithfully his wonderful wife had served him during his entire married life. In the meantime, the time was there, the Yaman king, Fear, drew near the king to arrest him and to take him and his followers, like the life heir and the desires, with him. And as soon as they left the city was immediately dismantled and smashed to dust. So let's pause for a minute and try to understand in real life, what does this all mean? So fear is approaching the king. What does that mean? Death, but at the time of death, one is very scared, extremely afraid, can't do anything. But what's going with him, with the soul, that is, what goes with the soul from one body to another body?
Worry. Karma.
I'm sorry, karma, yes, so that's one.
Mind, intelligence.
Mind.
Intelligence and ego.
Yes, okay, that's a subtle body. And anything else?
Our good deeds.
That's karma.
That is karma.
That's karma.
And Prabhu name.
I'm sorry?
Prabhu, name of the Prabhu, the chanting,
yes, so
or whatever.
Yes.
Austerities.
All the spiritual credits.
Spiritual.
There they go. And the mind carries with it all the impressions of previous life. The sanskaras. Yes. Okay. So the fear is dragging all this with him. And then it says, as soon as they left the city, it was immediately dismantled and smashed to dust. What does that mean?
Karma, can you say at the end, like rituals?
Right. So basically you are cremated or buried or whatever. That's what happens to the body. Body is destroyed immediately. Nobody hangs on to the body, not for long anyway. So, as the king was being forcibly dragged away, all the animals that King Puranjan had killed in various sacrifices, who had been pointed out by Narada Muni, they began to pierce him with their horns. And he felt like his body was being cut into a million pieces. They saw. So his journey was very painful. And then something more interesting happened. What was he thinking about at the time of death? From what
Like who will take care of his family and wife?
Right. So he was thinking about his wife. Right. He was still in love, still very attached to his wife. So therefore, he was remembering his wife had given up his body. So what does Krishna say in chapter 8 about what happens about whatever you're thinking about the moment of death? What does he say?
It determines your next body.
Right.
You become that.
The next verse, the one kale. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam. Kalevaram. Antam evaite kaunteya ratad bhav bhavita. He says, whatever you're thinking about at the moment of death, that's the body you will get. So he was thinking about his wife, a female. So therefore, he got in his next birth, he got the body of a female, but a very beautiful female, daughter of a king of a place called Vidarbha. So king of Vidarbha had King Puranjan as his daughter in this birth. So in those days, they give the name of daughters of boys with some kind of either the name of the king or the name of the city or the country they were from. So being from Vidarbha, she was called Vaidarbhi. Just like coming from Kaikeya Desh, was Kaikeyi. And daughter of Drupada was Draupadi. So same idea. So she was called Vaidarbhi. So Vaidarbhi married a very powerful man named Malayadhwaja. And they enjoyed their life for many years, long time. They raised many children. And then finally they decided to retire to the forest to perform austerities for 100 years of demigods. Each day of demigods is equal to 1 year here. So 360 years, earth years, equals one demigod year. So 100 of those years. So he and she together performed austerities for 100 years of demigods. At the end of which, he became pure devotee of Lord Krishna. And he performed devotional service along with his wife. And after some time, he gave up his body. Vaidarbhi was the only one around, so she created it. And she was about to enter the fire in the process known as sati to burn herself or her body in the same fire when she was approached by the super soul, the Lord, super soul who came in the form of a Brahman. And he told her that he was an old friend whom she had forgotten. And he said, sometimes you are a man, sometimes you're a woman, sometimes you're a eunuch. But it's because of the body. It's not you, it's the body. In reality, both you and I are pure spiritual identities. And he said, we have lived together, which means as soul and super soul, like two swans in a lake for a very long time. Actually, since time immemorial, always. He said, but when one swan listens to the other swan's instructions, he regains his original Krishna consciousness, which is lost or which was lost because of material consciousness. And then he disappeared, turning her into a pure devotee as well. And she also went to the same place that her husband had done. So Narada Muni then wrapped up this whole story and he told King Prachinbarhi that this story I have told you is really an instruction for self-realization. To which King Prachinbarhi said My dear Lord Narada Muni, I'm afraid I don't completely appreciate your allegorical story. I've been so attached to fruitive activities that I have no idea what you're trying to tell me. So please elaborate. So you got the gist of the story way easier than this king did, simply because, as he confessed, he's too attached to fruitive activities. So very patiently, Narada Muni explained that Puranjan is the living entity who transmigrates into various bodies as the so-called enjoyer of the bodies and remains in the material consciousness of I and mine. The Brahmin who came to help the wife of Maladhwaja, he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who's the master and eternal friend of every living entity. And then he basically went on to explain things that we just discussed, the 10 senses, the servants being 10 senses, and their wives being the sense objects, the desires, 500 serpent being the life here, etc., etc. So he explained all those things that we just discussed a few minutes ago to the king. And then he said that the living entity is exactly like a dog who, when overcome with hunger, goes from door to door to door for some food. And according to his destiny, he sometimes receives punishment, like somebody kicks him or hits him with a stick, and he's driven out. And at other times, he receives a little food to eat. And just similarly, the living entity, being influenced by so many desires, the hunger for desires, wanders in different species of life according to destiny. Sometimes it goes to the heavenly planets, sometimes to hell, sometimes to the middle planets, and so on. The living entities try to counteract different material conditions, but they fail every time because it is not in their control to control their destiny. And he said, the living entity situation is like that of a man who may carry a burden, a big box, let's say, a heavy big box on his head. And when he feels it's getting very heavy, he sometimes gives relief to his head by putting that same box or burden on his shoulder. And in this way, he tries to relieve himself of the burden. So head to right shoulder, back to the head, to left shoulder, and back and forth, back and forth. In this way, he tries to relieve himself of the burden. However, whatever process he decides to counteract the burden, it does nothing more than put the same burden from one place to another place. So all you do is moving the burden here to there, still on your body. You're still feeling that burden. And then he explains further. He says, sometimes the living entity dreams of a tiger or a snake and feels very afraid in that dream. But that fear goes away when he wakes up and finds there's no tiger, there's no snake. Similarly, he said the living entity, unless it wakes up from his sleep of ignorance and surrenders to Krishna, he cannot become detached from this material world and cannot get rid of all the fear of this material world. The only way to get rid of the fear is to serve Lord Krishna in the company of pure devotees. Now it's being very clear. The only way to get rid of all the fear is to serve Krishna in the company of pure devotees. And he said, the demigod worship does not help one to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because that can happen only by the causeless mercy of the Lord when a person is fully engaged in devotional service. So it's interesting. You cannot get devotional service without the mercy of the Lord. And you get the mercy of the Lord when you engage in devotional service. And then Narada Muni said to the king, never take to the fruitive activities again, because they will not ever take you to the ultimate goal of life. Rather, it will continue your cycle of repeated birth and death. That's it, done. And you keep coming in different types of bodies according to your karmas and your desires. So then he explained the whole process of transmigration of the soul. And he gave the example of a caterpillar. When a caterpillar moves from one leaf to the next leaf, it does that by first capturing one leaf, then leaving the other one, and then so on and so forth. So similarly, the living entity captures another body according to its karma and desires before it gives up the current body. So we discussed this some time ago, that before the soul leaves the body, its next body has already been determined according to its karma and desires. We discussed that in great detail when we were talking about Lord Kapila and Mother Devhuti in 3rd Canto. And he said, Karmana Dev Natrena, Jentur Deho Pattai. And according to our karmas, which are witnessed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the form of Super Soul and by all the demigods, it is given a different mother in whose womb it takes birth in a particular type of body according to its karma and desires. So he said, therefore, to stop this transmigration, one should engage in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who's the creator, the maintainer, and the annihilator of this cosmic manifestation. So basically, the best and the only way to stop death. Okay, let me ask you a one-word answer. What is the best? Okay, 3-word answer. What is the best way to never die?
Remember Lord.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Remember Lord.
Always remember Krishna.
Always remember Krishna. Okay, what else?
Do good deeds, like spread the spiritual word so that people
Okay, so
keep
basically you're
thinking
saying
of you.
remembering spiritual, basically perform devotional service.
Yes.
Where I was going with was the best way to not die is to not be born. If you're not born, you cannot die.
Yeah, that's
right?
Do not take birth.
And the best way to not be born is to cut the cycle of birth and death. And the best way to do that is what you just said. Always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. Perform devotional service in the company of pure devotees. Right? So our focus should be not how and when we're going to die, but on how we make sure we don't take birth again. That's why when you sing happy birthday, what do we say? May you never take birth again. Right? So that's the idea. If you're not born, you cannot die. So let's all work at how do we make sure we never take birth again. And that's the process of devotional, pure devotional service, always remembering Krishna, never forgetting Krishna. So Narada Muni explained in that way, King Prachinbarhi very finally understood the message. And he left home. He left home to undergo austerities in a holy place called Kapilashram, which is also known as Ganga Sagar, which is at the confluence of Ganga and the Bay of Bengal. And he engaged himself in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. And actually, Maitreya Rishi is telling the story to Vidura. He said, one who relates this narration will be liberated from material bondage and will no longer have to wander with this material world. Which is another way of saying, will not take birth again. Now, I want to pause here, and I want you to think about how many people are narrating this story. So would somebody like to tell me how many people are involved in telling this story? I'm not talking about Narada Muni. I'm not talking about the kings. Other than them, who's involved here? In telling and hearing. Who's telling whom?
Prabhupada also.
Well, go ahead. Finish your answer.
To whom is narrating? I don't know, Prabhuji. Sorry.
Well, Prabhupada is narrating to all of us with his books. So that's clear. But I'm talking about like in the Bhagavatam itself. How many people are involved in telling and hearing this story? Start from the beginning. Sorry, Radhika, you were saying?
I don't know if it's the beginning. I was going to say Vidura and Maitreya Rishi.
Yes, they are there for sure.
So then, also you said not the two kings, but not Narada Muni. So
They are there, of course.
Shukadev Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj.
Yes, absolutely.
And then Sutta Goswami and the sages of Nimish.
Very good. So let's start there. Sutta Goswami is telling the sages of Naimisharanya what Shukdev was telling Parikshit Maharaj.
Yep.
Right? And Shukdev is telling Parikshit Maharaj what Maitreya is telling Vidura. And Maitreya is telling Vidura what Narada Muni told King Prachinbarhi.
Yeah.
So this is like in computer language we used to call it nested loops. So many people involved, but they're all repeating the story, which is what Bhagavatam is about. It's about repeating all the stories about the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his devotees. So this is a prime example of so many people narrating and repeating that story. But nobody's taking the credit. Sutta Goswami said, I heard it from Shukdev. Sutta Goswami said, this is Maitreya Rishi talking. Maitreya Rishi said, this is Narada Muni talking. And where did Maitreya Rishi hear it? He heard it from Krishna. Right? So, just want to make that point. Okay, so now what? Vidura, who was being told all the story by Maitreya Rishi, he said, I want to come back to the story of Prachetas. So please tell me, what were their activities after they met Lord Shiva and got that mantra? So Maitreya Rishi said, well, as I mentioned before, they performed austerities for 10,000 years. And for those 10,000 years, they repeated the mantra given by Lord Shiva. And finally, the Lord appeared. Lord Vishnu appeared in front of them on the shoulders of Garuda. Garuda, as you know, is the bird carrier of Lord Vishnu. And the Lord said, my dear sons of the king, King Prachinbarhi, I am very much pleased by the friendly relationship among you. I give a seminar on developing positive relationships. And I have a slide in that presentation which quotes this verse. Basically, Lord Krishna is saying, why am I so happy with you? Can somebody repeat it for me? What did Krishna say, or Lord Vishnu say? Why so happy with them?
Because of their cooperation?
Yeah, because of their cooperation, their good relationship with each other. They have the same focus, same goal. And they're working together to get to that goal. So I'm very pleased because you have friendly relationship among yourselves. And he said, you're all engaged in one occupation. What's that occupation after Prachetas? Anyone? Devotional service. That's
repeating the mantra.
Repeating the mantra.
You.
Correct. Which is the performance of devotional service. And he said, I'm so pleased with your mutual friendship that I wish you all good fortune. Now you may ask a benediction. Ask for a benediction. And then he also said, that you will be celebrated all over the world because you have accepted and executed the order of your father so faithfully. So first he appreciated their own relationship, and then they appreciated their loyalty and obedience to their father. It's a big message for all of us from the Lord directly. And he said, you go and marry the daughter of a Rishi by the name of Kandu, an Apsara, which is a heavenly damsel, by the name of Pramlocha. Her parents abandoned her in the forest as soon as she was born. And when she was crying in hunger, the moon god, out of compassion for her, placed his finger, which poured nectar within her mouth. And then the Lord blessed them to enjoy this world and the heavenly world for 1 million celestial years. I said, after that, you will develop pure devotional service unto me, and then you will return back home to Godhead. The Prachetas then offered their own prayers to the Lord, and they were purified by the presence of the Lord. And they said, this is very common, by the way, when the Lord appears in front of devotee. So ask for a benediction. The devotee said, I got your shelter. I got the shelter of your lotus feet. What other benediction do I need? And Prachetas said the same thing. And then they said, all we want is association of pure devotees. For as long as we are here in this material world, all we want is association of pure devotees. And then they repeated the mantra that I had referred to earlier in the class. So same mantra with a couple of very minor differences got repeated by them. And they said, Tuliyan lavenapi na swargam na punarbhunam bhagavad sangi sangasya marthya nam ki mutashija. So same thing. Even a fraction of a moment's association with a pure devotee is better than obtaining heavenly kingdoms or moksha. And anybody who has received the association of pure devotees does not care for any benediction from any demigods, because all they can do is give the material benedictions. They credited their association with Lord Shiva as the cause for the good fortune of seeing the Lord. And then, you know how in Bhagavad Gita Krishna says, offer it all to me, the results of all your work to me. They did the same thing. They actually offered all their spiritual assets. They had no material assets, right? For 10,000 years, they were standing underwater. So they offer all the spiritual assets. What are some of the spiritual assets? Things like studying the Vedas that they had done before coming. They had accepted a spiritual master, was Lord Shiva, and they were offering respects to the devotees. Those were their spiritual assets, and they offered it all to the Lord. Basically, the symbolism means whatever they had, 100% they offered to the Lord. God, of course, accepted that, blessed them, and he left. The Prachetas got out of the water, went out to the forest, but they noticed that all the trees on land had grown very tall. They couldn't even see the sky. And there were so many that they covered the entire surface of the world. This made them very angry. And they emitted fire from their mouths, and they started burning all the trees. But they were going too far in their act of burning the trees. So noticing this, Lord Brahma appeared and pacified them with some words of logic, this is not right, can't do this, all those kind of things. And he ordered the trees to deliver the daughter of Kandu Rishi and Pramlocha to the Prachetas. And he ordered the Prachetas to marry her, which they did. And with her, they had a son named Daksha. Yes, the same old Daksha. He had taken birth again, this time as the son of the Prachetas. It takes us to the final chapter, chapter 31, which is entitled Narada Muni instructs the Prachetas. So the Prachetas spent thousands of years enjoying their life with Brahmalocha, and finally they decided to go back to the forest to perform mystic yoga. And one day Narada Muni came to see them, I should say, because there's 10 of them. They welcomed him warmly, offered their respect, and then they admitted to Narada Muni, "My dear Lord Muni, we almost forgot your instructions and the instructions we received from Lord Shiva and from Lord Vishnu, because we got so attached to the family." And they requested Narada Muni to please instruct them again. So Narada Muni started instructing them by first telling them about the 3 types of births that a human being takes. Anybody knows what 3 types of births are for civilized human beings? Civilized meaning one who's familiar with the Vedic instructions. So what's the first obvious birth?
Mother's womb.
From the mother.
Mother's womb. Correct. It's called Shokra. What's the second one? Initiation. It's called Yagya. It's called Savitra. What's the third one?
Sannyasi.
Not sannyasi, no.
Brahman Diksha?
Yes, Brahman Diksha, very good. It's called Yagya. So he talked about those 3 words, basically saying that everyone should go through those 3 births. And then he said, despite the opportunity of such births, if one does not actually engage in devotional service, then everything is useless. Shrameva kevalam, as Bhagavatam says. It's totally useless. Without devotional service, there's no meaning to severe austerities, or the process of hearing and chanting or speaking, or mental speculation, or having intelligence, or having powerful senses. What's the use of all that? He said, not just that, even transcendental practices such as mystic yoga, Sankhya yoga, renunciation, studying the Vedas, they're all useless unless they're used to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There's a very famous verse in Srimad Bhagavatam. It's the first canto, chapter 2, text 28 through 31. And it says, Vasdeva Paraveda, Vasdeva Paraveda, Parayoga, Vasdeva Parakriya, Vasdeva Paragyanam, Vasdeva Paramtapo, Vasdeva Parodharmo, Vasdeva Paragate. Which basically means the whole purpose of studying the Vedas, the whole purpose of doing yoga, the whole purpose of doing any activity, the whole purpose of gaining knowledge, the whole purpose of performing austerities, and the supreme duty, supreme occupational duty is to serve and understand the Lord. If whatever you're doing is not for that purpose, it's useless. There's another very wonderful verse in one of the Upanishads, I forget the name now. It says, Antar Bahir Yadi Hari Kim Tapa. Antar Bahir Yadi Na Hari Kim Tapa. Which means if you have the Lord in your heart, then what's the need or use of performing any austerities? But if you don't have the Lord in your heart, then what is the use of performing any austerities? So the point being, it's all about knowing and understanding and serving the Lord. Everything else is useless. And then knowing the tendency to worship demigods and other personalities, he said another very famous verse, another very favorite verse of mine. He said, Yatha taror mool nishechnen, tapyanti tat skand bhujopashakha, pranopahara cha mithendriyanam, tathava sarvarhanam achiteja. He said, just like by watering the root of a tree, the entire tree, including its stem, its branches and twigs and leaves, they become nourished. Just like putting food in the stomach, all the senses become strong. Similarly, by worshipping Lord Krishna, everyone, including all the demigods and all other entities, become satisfied. And then he added to another verse, which said that, just like during rainy season, the sun generates water to make the clouds. And in due course of time, during the summer season, that very same water is is released by the sun. I'm not sure I'm saying it right. So let's say it again. During the summer season, the water is taken away from the ocean, let's say, by the sun's heat. It forms clouds. And during rainy season, the same clouds generate the water and give it back to the ocean and everywhere else. So similarly, he's saying all the living entities, moving or inert, they're generated from earth. I'm talking about the bodies, right? And again, after some time, they return to the earth as dust.
Yep.
Similarly, everything emanates from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in due course of time, everything enters into him again. So what we talked about earlier, that at the time of annihilation, all the living entities enter the womb of Lord Narayan or Mahavishnu, and the material basically is finished. So Narada Muni then instructed them to engage in the service of Supreme Personality of Godhead. He said he's the cause of all causes, but he's easily controlled by his pure devotees. And he does not leave his pure devotees even for a second. On the contrary, he does not accept worship from those who are puffed up with their material education, wealth, aristocracy, and fruitive activities. Which is basically what Mother Kunti had also said in her prayers. When she said, Janmashwar Shatushebi, Edaman Madapuman, Navarti Adhit Avidhatu Vai, Atama Kinchan Gochara. So basically those who are proud of their education, their lineage, their wealth, their position in the society, they don't have any feelings for Krishna. Therefore, it's not available to them. But those who don't consider anything to be theirs is available to them and visible to them all the time. So when the Prachetas heard all this from Narada Muni, they became very attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they started to meditate on his lotus feet, and ultimately got to the ultimate destination. So that's the end of the story, as told by Maitreya Rishi to Vidura. When Vidura heard all this, he became totally overwhelmed. He offered his obeisances to his guru, which is Maitreya Rishi, with eyes full of tears, thanked him for his causeless mercy, left for Hastinapur, which we have already covered when he went back to Hastinapur and preached Dhritarashtra to leave home. That's the end of the 4th canto. 2 weeks from now, we'll do 5th canto, starting with the activities of the son of Priyavrata, who was the second son of Swayambhu Manu, or the brother of King Uttanpad, or he was an uncle of King Dhruva, Dhruva Maharaj. That's it. Questions, comments? I also need to know whether I confused you all. Was it too much information?
Too many names, Prabhu.
Too many names. Yes, that's true. Srimad Bhagavatam is full of names.
Yeah.
But interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, many analogies.
Yes, too many. Too many. And that's why I was concerned that it might get confusing. So if anybody's confused, please ask.
So, Prabhu, what was the need to, Narad Muni to go all through the analogies instead of telling very straightforward, hey, whatever you are doing is a waste in your life and your energy. You are not achieving anything. It is material, whatever you are enjoying as well as sacrifices, because he made a lot of sacrifices, whatever given in scripture. So kind of he was following, no doubt, at the lower strata he was following. So instead of teaching him straightforward, why he gave such a strong analogies, complicated. Yes.
So let me ask you a question. When was the last time you were able to convince a total karmi that should perform devotional service? They're not interested. They don't get it. You tell them that's good for you to fast a whole day, they think you're nuts. You tell them you don't want to enjoy wine and liquor and meat and onion and garlic, they think you're nuts. Right? So King Prachinbarhi would have called Narada Muni a nut. So he had to take him through all this. Because when you give some examples that really enter your heart, then you understand it. Otherwise, straight philosophy, sometimes they don't understand, sometimes they don't want to understand, therefore they don't understand. This was a very powerful way, and we should follow that when we talk to people who are not devotees. Give them examples, very practical examples that they can relate to, then they'll get it. We stay esoterical and keep talking deep philosophy, they won't get it. So that was the reason, Babu. Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, when the king left his body at the time of death, he was remembering his wife. And so then before he got his next body as a female, there was a period of time in which he was suffering and experiencing the pain. All the animals that he had killed had come to give him the same sort of pain. So is that taking place in some sort of like holding place for the soul, like a hellish planet before the soul moves into the next body?
Yeah, what the Srimad Bhagavatam is saying is that as he was journeying to his next destination, this was happening. It doesn't talk about any period or place where it was happening. So as he was traveling, as he was being dragged away, this was happening.
Okay, and then is it a correct assumption that in this particular case, this is how this person's karma played out? It's not necessarily that as the soul is moving that we experience this. It could be that in our next life, in the next body, a person may have to face the reactions of killing other species, right? It's not always in this.
Yeah, so yeah, this is all over the map. It could be, it's all it could be. It could be what we just heard. It could be that he actually goes to hell and suffers even more. Or it could be that he suffers in the next life. So we don't know how that works. But yes, the answer to all of them is yes, it could be. Okay, then some, as you know, go to the Pitraloka where they don't know where they're going to end up. So there's so many different permutations and combinations. And it's not clear, at least to me, how is it determined? I don't know that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Just a comment. When you were sharing the story of the king, how he was thinking about a woman and became got a female body in the next life, I was just thinking like how what Krishna talks in Bhagavad Gita. There are tons of related examples in Srimad Bhagavatam for us to tell others when they say, oh, like, when Krishna says, whatever you think at the time of that, you become that in your next life. So I was just thinking like how I can pick examples from Bhagavatam to just justify those points that Krishna.
Correct. You also the story of Jad Bharat.
Yeah.
He was thinking about the deer and took the body of deer. So yeah, there are examples like that. So, and it's always good to give the examples because then people can relate to it. Another example is given that, and I forget where I read it, I said that you can tell a person who just spent a long time in hell before getting this birth. His facial expressions, his features, his nature, they all tell you where he's coming from. So that's another example. Although it's kind of subjective, but it's mentioned in the Puranas that you can tell.
Very curious. Where I
Yeah, I'll have to find out where is it said. It no, I don't want to make a guess. I'll find out for you. I'll tell you exactly what it said, but it is said.
Prabhu, I was just thinking, comparing Prachinbarhi king and sons of his Prachinbarhi. So Prachinbarhi, as a king, he remained fully materialist. So his sons made a progress, did so much of the austerity, and then lost their way again. After marriage, again they came back. Right, Prabhu?
Yes, correct.
So
Which is
again, message. For,
exactly right.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, exactly right. There's a lot of messages in the story. A lot of messages. But the main one is that at the end of it, everybody asks for the benediction of being able to perform devotional service in the company of pure devotees.
Yeah.
And if there's one thing you're taking away from this class, it should be that even a moment's association with a pure devotee is better than any promotion to heaven or getting liberation or any kind of material benediction. Which also goes on to say that it's useless to worship demigods. You worship, even if you used to be a worshiper of demigods, you start worshiping Krishna, and that means you not stop worshiping the demigods. But they're being worshipped as and when you worship Krishna. The example of the watering the root of the tree. In being the root, you water that root. Every leaf, every twig, every branch, every stem is nourished. Everybody's happy. Lord Shiva was happier when you worship Krishna than when you worship him. And that's a very prime example.
Prabhuji, when you were telling this story, the one of those was coming in my mind, wherein this analogy was coming in my mind. I think just recently one of the devotee friends shared that cartoon with me, and it was showing that there is a man who is hanging from a tree, and there are the snakes at the bottom of the feet, a big like in the well, and there are the snakes in that well, and there are two rats, like white and black rat. They are representing day and night. And then there is an elephant who is shaking that tree with his trunk, and this man is hanging from that tree, and on top of that tree there is a honeybee hive, and that for that one drop of honey, that man is hanging from that tree, and bees are all around him. Haribol?
Haribol, so I'm waiting if you're finished or.
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, I thought I'm mute. So this is like that kind of analogy is sometimes really bewildered. That elephant is like the karmas, and the snake in the well is the future karmas coming from your deeds. And then the branches of the tree is like your life, and it can cut anytime. And then the situation is so dangerous that there is a honey beehive, and for that one moment of pleasure of that honey, one drop of honey, that man is still not ready to see the super soul.
Correct. That's exactly right. So yeah, just that one drop of honey says, good. Life is not so bad after all. He
Yes.
forgets all the dangers that are surrounding him. And that's real life. That's who we are. That's what we do. For momentary pleasure, we give up so much. Yes, thank you for sharing that, Mataji.
Yeah, thank you so much for wonderful class, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, then that's fine. Oh, should stop then? It's 9:45 already. So thank you again. So are we all in agreement that next week we'll glorify Lord Nityanand?
Yes.
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay, all right.
Yes,
So we'll do
Prabhuji.
that. Thank you. We'll do that, and then week after we'll start with Canto 5. So thank you all again for patiently listening. Hare Krishna.
Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare
Thank
Krishna.
you.
Thank you.
Hare
Thank you
Krishna.
so much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Vancha kalpatarabhyascha kripasindhubhyo patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.